Most people think a $quarter coin is worth just 25 cents. But what if I told you that some of these ordinary-looking coins could actually be worth hundreds or even thousands of dollars? Collectors all around the world are desperately searching for a few specific rare quarters that hide secret minting errors, unique dates, and hidden markings that turn simple pocket change into treasure. These 5 rare $quarter coins could change your life forever. So before you spend another quarter, make sure you watch till the end, because you might already have one of these valuable coins lying unnoticed in your wallet right now. The story of the 1972 Washington quarter begins not only with the coin itself, but with the long tradition of the Washington Quarter series, which was first struck in 1932 to commemorate the bicentennial of George Washington's birth. The Treasury Department had sought to honor the first president of the United States with a coin that would reflect dignity, respect, and permanence, and after reviewing several designs, the portrait of Washington by sculptor John Flanagan was chosen based on the classical bust created in 1785 by French artist Jean-Antoine Houdon. This portrait became the enduring image that would remain on the quarter for decades, and by the time 1972 arrived, the Washington quarter had already been circulating for 40 years, solidifying its place as a staple of American coinage. The year 1972 itself was a time of transition and change in the United States socially, politically, and economically. The Vietnam War was still a defining issue. Richard Nixon was president, and the country was experiencing shifts in culture and society against this backdrop. The Washington quarter continued its role as both a common everyday coin and as a collectible for numismatists. It was minted in large numbers. Yet the details of the 1972 issue tell a unique story of design, production, and value. The obverse of the 1972 Washington quarter carried the familiar profile of George Washington facing left, with the word liberty at the top, the phrase, "In God we trust," positioned just to the left of the portrait, and the date 1972 clearly inscribed at the bottom. This design had become so iconic by this point that it symbolized American stability and tradition. The reverse design created by John Flanagan as well featured a majestic bald eagle with outstretched wings clutching a bundle of arrows in its talons, and flanked by olive branches above the eagle. The words United States of America were boldly inscribed with the denomination $quarter at the bottom, and the motto, E pluribus unum. Just above the eagle's head, this powerful image combined strength with peace, reflecting the dual character of the nation. From a technical standpoint, the 1972 Washington quarter was struck at 3 different mints: the Philadelphia Mint, which produced coins without a mint mark; the Denver Mint, which used the D mint mark; and the San Francisco Mint, which produced proof coins bearing the S mint mark. The Philadelphia and Denver coins were intended for general circulation, while the San Francisco proof issues were specially struck for collectors. The proof coins stood out because of their mirrored fields and frosted devices, which displayed the artistry of the original design in its sharpest form. One of the most significant aspects of the 1972 Washington quarter is its composition. By this time, silver had already been removed from the quarter 5 years earlier in 1965 due to rising silver prices and public hoarding. Prior to that, quarters were 90% silver and 10% copper. But beginning in 1965, the mint introduced a clad composition consisting of an outer layer of copper nickel bonded to a pure copper core. The 1972 quarter followed this same standard with a total composition of 91.67% copper and 8.33% nickel. This change allowed the mint to continue producing large quantities of quarters without the risk of losing money to rising bullion values. The clad composition also gave the quarter its modern look and feel, with a silvery color that was harder and more resistant to wear than the older silver issues. The mintage numbers for the 1972 Washington quarter were significant, with hundreds of millions struck in Philadelphia and Denver combined. This ensured that the coin was readily available across the nation for everyday transactions. However, as with many coins, The large mintage did not prevent variations and errors from entering circulation. Some 1972 quarters displayed striking anomalies such as doubled dies, weak strikes off center strikes, and other minting mistakes, which became prized by collectors because of their rarity and uniqueness. Even today, certain varieties from 1972 remain highly collectible with values depending on their condition. Rarity and visibility of the error, condition and grading play an essential role in the story of the 1972 Washington quarter coins that circulated heavily in commerce, naturally show signs of wear with flattened hair details on Washington's portrait and worn feathers on the eagle, but uncirculated examples preserved straight from mint sets or rolls reveal the sharpness of the original design. And these high-grade coins, especially those graded mint state 65 and above by professional grading services, carry strong collector premiums. Proof coins from San Francisco in deep cameo contrast are also valued highly for their aesthetic beauty and scarcity. In terms of numismatic context, the 1972 Washington quarter sits at an interesting place in history. The coin bridges the gap between the earlier silver issues and the modern clad era. It reflects the changing economic realities of the late 1960s and early 1970s, when the United States had to adapt its coinage to deal with inflation, rising commodity prices, and the demands of mass circulation. Yet despite these changes, the Washington quarter remained visually consistent, carrying the same portrait and reverse design that Americans had known for decades. This continuity gave the coin a sense of familiarity, even as the nation itself underwent dramatic transformations. Beyond its technical and artistic aspects, the 1972 quarter also represents an important chapter in the cultural life of the United States. Coins serve as miniature historical documents reflecting the values and identity of a nation at a given time. The Washington quarter in 1972 spoke to the enduring respect for the founding father, the reliance on national symbols like the eagle, and the balancing of economic necessity with artistic tradition. It was both an object of daily use passed from hand to hand in stores and markets, and a piece of history waiting to be examined closely by collectors when examining the legacy of the 1972 Washington quarter. It is essential to consider the broader Washington quarter series itself, from its origin in 1932 through the clad transition of 1965 and into the later state quarters program launched in 1999. The Washington quarter has been one of the most versatile and widely collected coins in American history. The 1972 issue is a vital part of that legacy, representing the stability of the design while also embodying the modern materials and minting practices that would define the series for decades to come. Even today, 50 years later, the 1972 Washington quarter remains a point of fascination for collectors, historians, and coin enthusiasts. Some search for high-grade mint state examples, others hunt for rare error coins, and still others simply enjoy holding a piece of circulating history that connects directly back to the traditions of the United States Mint. For a collector building a date and mint mark set of Washington quarters, the 1972 issues are indispensable, and for those interested in modern American coinage, they offer a fascinating study of design continuity, economic adaptation, and cultural symbolism. Thus, the 1972 Washington quarter is not merely a piece of change, it is a snapshot of American history in metal, a continuation of a tradition that began with George Washington's bicentennial and one that would carry forward into the 21st century. Its design, its composition, its errors and varieties, and its cultural meaning all combine to make it a subject worthy of detailed study and appreciation for both novice collectors and advanced numismatists alike. Imagine holding in your hand a simple 25-cent piece minted in 1988, a coin that might appear to be ordinary to the casual observer. Yet when you look closer and understand its background, you begin to see that the 1988 Washington quarter represents not only a piece of American currency, but also a chapter in the larger narrative of United States history, coinage artistry, and economic policy. The Washington quarter series itself dates back to 1932, when the United States prepared To celebrate the 200th anniversary of George Washington's birth, the Treasury Department and the United States Mint decided that the quarter-dollar denomination would serve as the medium for honoring the first president of the United States. A competition was held, and the winning design came from sculptor John Flanagan, who based his portrait of Washington on the famous bust created in 1785 by the French neoclassical sculptor Jean-Antoine Houdon from 1932 until 1964, Washington. Quarters were composed of 90% silver and 10% copper, but with the rising value of silver in the early 1960s, Congress moved to a clad composition beginning in 1965. From that year onward, the quarter was produced with an outer layer of copper-nickel alloy bonded to a pure copper core, giving the coin its familiar silvery color while eliminating its precious metal content. By 1988, the Washington quarter had been in circulation for more than half a century, and the design, though simple and elegant, had become an enduring icon of American coinage. On the obverse of the 1988 Washington quarter, you find the familiar bust of George Washington facing, left the word Liberty arched above his head. The national motto, "In God We Trust," to the left of his portrait, and the date 1988 placed below Washington's neck. The mint mark, if present, appears to the right of the ribbon that binds his hair in a queue. During this year, quarters were struck at both the Philadelphia Mint and the Denver Mint, as indicated by the presence of a P or D mint mark, while coins produced in Philadelphia prior to 1980 did not bear a mint mark. By 1988, the P mark had become standard practice-proof. Versions of the 1988 quarter were also struck at the San Francisco Mint, and these proofs display an S mint mark. The reverse of the 1988 Washington quarter maintained Flanagan's original eagle design, an American bald eagle with outstretched wings perched upon a bundle of arrows with two olive branches beneath. The design symbolized both readiness for defense and the pursuit of peace. The legend United States of America was inscribed around the top. The denomination quarter dollar placed at the bottom, and the phrase e pluribus unum, meaning out of many one, located just above the eagle's head. From a production standpoint, the 1988 Washington quarter was struck in the hundreds of millions, making it a common circulation coin as part of the broader series. However, the numismatic interest. In 1988, quarters often comes from mint state examples, coins that survived without wear or circulation, as well as error varieties or proof issues. Collectors often seek examples graded at the highest levels by third-party grading services, such as the professional coin grading service PCGS or the Numismatic Guarantee Company NGC. In such pristine conditions, values can increase significantly compared to face value, even though the majority of 1988 quarters remain common. The historical context of the late 1980s adds depth to the story of the 1988 Washington quarter. In 1988, Ronald Reagan was completing his second term as President of the United States. The country was experiencing significant political and economic shifts with the Cold War nearing its end, the stock market still recovering from the crash of October 1987, and technology beginning to reshape American life. In many ways, the circulation of quarters, such as the 1988 issue, represents the daily economic activity of an era when people used cash more frequently than they do today. Each coin changed hands countless times at gas stations, diners, movie theaters, and grocery stores before debit cards and digital payments became the norm. This places the 1988 quarter not only as a piece of metal but as a witness to a changing America. In the numismatic world, the 1988 Washington quarter also serves as a bridge between two eras. By the late 1980s, discussions were already beginning within the United States Mint about refreshing the nation's circulating coinage programs. By the end of the following decade, the state quarters program would launch in 1999, transforming the familiar reverse design into a series of rotating commemoratives that celebrated all 50 states. In hindsight, the 1988 quarter stands among the last decade of traditional eagle reverse issues that had defined the quarter for generations. Another important aspect for collectors is the role of errors and varieties in 1988 quarter production. The minting process at such a large scale often produced mistakes that today are highly sought after among specialists. Examples include double-die obverses or reverses off center strikes, broad strikes, and coins struck on the wrong planche. Such coins, though rare, can command substantial premiums depending on the severity of the error and the condition of the coin when preserved. The proof quarters minted in San Francisco during 1988 are especially notable. These were intended for collectors and were struck with polished dies on specially prepared planches to achieve sharp details and mirror-like surfaces. In many cases, the contrast between the frosted devices and the reflective fields creates what numismatists call a cameo or deep. Cameo finish modern grading services evaluate these attributes carefully, and high-grade deep cameo proofs from 1988 are prized additions to Washington quarter collections. It is also worth mentioning how the Washington quarter design of 1988 reflects the artistic conventions of its time. Flanagan's original design had been criticized over the decades by some numismatists and art critics who felt that the portrait of Washington lacked strength or classical elegance. Others, however, appreciated its simplicity and directness. By the 1980s, after more than 50 years of use, the design had become so familiar that Americans associated the quarter almost instinctively with Washington's face, creating a cultural bond that made the coin part of everyday national identity. For those who study the economics of coinage, the 1988 quarter also reveals the impact of changing material values. The clad composition that began in 1965 had proven effective in stabilizing production costs. The intrinsic metal value of the 1988 quarter remained well below its face value, ensuring that coins would not be hoarded or melted for profit. As silver quarters had been 2 decades earlier, this cost efficiency allowed the mint to continue striking massive quantities of quarters for circulation, meeting the demands of commerce in an expanding economy. As we move deeper into the significance of the 1988 quarter, it becomes clear that while the coin itself may not be rare or precious in most cases, it carries layers of historical, economic, and cultural meaning that make it a fascinating subject for collectors, historians, and everyday Americans alike. The quarter embodies the legacy of George Washington, the artistry of John Flanagan, the practical realities of modern coinage, and the lived experience of countless individuals who used it in their daily lives. When you hold a 1988 Washington quarter, you are not just holding 25 cents, you are holding a piece of the late 20th century, a witness to both the continuity of American traditions and the subtle transformations that were reshaping the nation in the years leading up to the dramatic changes of the 1990s. Have you ever wondered how a small piece of metal in your pocket can hold within it an entire story of American history? Artistry, economics, and heritage, the 1993 Washington quarter is one such coin, a coin that at first glance might look like any other quarter. But once you begin to peel back its layers, you realize it is much more than just currency. It is a continuation of a tradition that began in 1932, when the United States Mint first introduced the Washington quarter to commemorate the bicentennial of George Washington's birth. The portrait that graces the obverse of the coin was created by John Flanagan based on Jean-Antoine Houdon's famous 1785 bust of Washington, and from its debut, this coin carried with it the essence of the nation's first president, symbolizing leadership, resilience, and the foundation of a republic that would grow into a global power. By 1993, the Washington quarter had already been in circulation for over 6 decades, and during that time it had undergone subtle yet important changes. The 1965 switch from 90% silver to a copper-nickel-clad composition forever altered the intrinsic value of the coin, moving it away from precious metal content and into the modern era of cost efficiency and mass production. The 1993 quarter represents a part of that copper-nickel era, struck in immense numbers at both the Philadelphia and Denver mints with the familiar P and D mint marks. while the San Francisco Mint produced proof coins for collectors. Featuring sharper strikes and mirror-like fields, to understand the 1993 Washington Quarter fully, you must consider the broader economic and cultural context of the early 1990s. America was experiencing the aftermath of the Cold War, a period of technological growth and economic shifts, and the coins of the era served not only as instruments of commerce, but also as quiet witnesses to the daily life of millions of Americans, vending machines, parking meters, toll booths, supermarkets, all of these everyday places saw the circulation of the 1993 quarter, and yet while countless examples were spent and forgotten, others were carefully saved by collectors who recognized the value in pristine, uncirculated or proof strikes. The design of the coin itself continued the tradition, with the obverse still displaying the left-facing bust of George Washington with the word Liberty. Above the motto, "In God We Trust," to the left, and the date 1993. At the bottom, the reverse remained unchanged. Since the eagle design, introduced in 1932, with a bold heraldic eagle clutching arrows and olive branches, a timeless symbol of strength and peace that resonated with generations. The artistry may have seemed simple by modern standards, but it reflected the neoclassical influence that dominated American coinage for much of the 20th century. Mintage figures also tell us much about the 1993 quarter. The Philadelphia Mint produced over 639 million examples, while the Denver Mint struck more than 662 million, and the San Francisco Mint created nearly 3 million clad proofs, along with a smaller number of silver proof sets for collectors. Though these silver proofs were not intended for circulation, they carried the spirit of the older, pre-1965 quarters, connecting modern collectors with the rich silver heritage of the series. This vast production ensured that the 1993 quarter was available everywhere across the country. Yet condition rarity became the defining factor for collectors, with high-grade mint state coins, particularly those graded MS-67 or MS-68 by professional services, commanding significant premiums in the numismatic market. The history of the Washington Quarter in 1993 also intersects with the larger narrative of American coinage reform. Within just a few years, the United States Mint would embark on the monumental state quarter program launched in 1999, which would forever change the way Americans looked at their pocket change. The 1993 quarter thus sits at an important transitional moment. It was one of the last issues before the dramatic redesign that would capture national attention and inspire a new wave of collecting. The simplicity of the 1993 design makes it a fascinating study when contrasted with the state quarters that followed, because it embodies the final chapter of a long era of uniformity before creativity and regional representation took center stage. Collectors often study varieties and errors when examining coins from this period, and the 1993 Washington Quarter is no exception. Die cracks off center strikes and doubled dies, though relatively scarce, do exist and provide intriguing case studies for specialists. Such minting anomalies turn ordinary circulation strikes into prized numismatic treasures, and they remind us that coin production, though mechanized on a massive scale, is still subject to human oversight and technical imperfection. To expand on the context, one must also recognize the role of the U.S. Mint itself in 1993, operating multiple facilities with increasingly advanced technology. The Mint was responsible for producing billions of coins annually, not just quarters, but pennies, nickels, dimes, half dollars, and dollars. The consistency and efficiency of production in this era highlight the federal government's ability to meet the demands of commerce while also serving the collecting community through proof and mint sets for hobbyists. In fact, the 1993 proof set became a popular acquisition among collectors, as it offered not just the quarter, but the entire range of denominations in a pristine presentation. When you hold a 1993 Washington Quarter, you are holding a piece of circulating history that speaks to more than just its 25-cent face value. It speaks to the artistry of Flanagan, the heritage of Washington, the economic realities of a post-silver coinage system, and the continuity of a design that had endured for over 60 years. It reminds us of a moment before, the Revolutionary State Quarters program, and it remains a symbol of stability during a decade of transition. If you trace the lifespan of these coins from minting to circulation to eventual collecting, you uncover countless stories: the pocket of a child buying candy, the toll booth of a commuter crossing a bridge, the change given to a customer at a diner. Each of these everyday moments is tied together by the humble 1993 quarter, which moved silently through American life and yet found itself enshrined in albums and holders by those who understood its place in the numismatic timeline. In summary, the 1993 Washington quarter is a study in continuity and change continuity, because it carried forward the same proud imagery of Washington and the eagle that had become familiar to generations, and change, because it foreshadowed the coming transformation of U.S. coinage into a new era of diversity and design innovation. It may not be rare in the sense of limited mintage, but its story is invaluable for anyone seeking to understand the evolution of American coinage and the enduring legacy of the Washington Quarter series. Imagine holding in your hand a simple piece of American history, a coin that at first glance seems ordinary, yet carries with it the weight of decades of tradition, artistry, and the ever-changing economic story of the United States. The 1978 Washington quarter is more than a small, silver-colored disc. It is a reflection of the United States Mint's evolution, a tribute to George Washington himself, and a reminder of the fascinating world of numismatics that continues to capture the attention of collectors and historians alike. The journey of the Washington quarter began in 1932, when the United States sought to commemorate the 200th anniversary of George Washington's birth. The Treasury Department and the United States Mint launched a design competition with the intention of replacing the standing Liberty quarter that had been in circulation since 1916. John Flanagan, a sculptor whose works were known for their neoclassical style, was selected to create the design. His portrait of George Washington was based on Jean-Antoine Houdon's famous bust of Washington, sculpted in 1785. The obverse featured Washington's profile facing left with the word "Liberty" above, and the phrase "In God We Trust" to the side. The date appeared at the bottom, while the reverse depicted an American eagle with wings outstretched, clutching arrows, symbolizing readiness for defense, and framed by olive branches representing peace. This design struck a balance between strength and dignity and became a permanent fixture of American coinage. By 1978, the Washington quarter had already been in circulation for nearly half a century and had undergone significant changes. One of the most important moments in its history came in 1965, when the Mint responded to the national coin shortage and the rising price of silver. Before 1965, quarters were struck in 90% silver and 10% copper, but economic pressures forced the transition to a clad composition of copper and nickel bonded to a pure copper core. This change not only saved the Mint money, but also ensured the public had access to circulating coinage, as silver coinage was rapidly disappearing into the hands of hoarders. By 1978, the clad quarter was firmly established as the standard, and the Washington design had become iconic, recognizable instantly by millions of Americans who carried it in their pockets daily. The 1978 Washington quarter itself was struck at multiple mints, including Philadelphia, Denver, and San Francisco. The Philadelphia Mint coins carried no mint mark. The Denver Mint coins bore the small d mint mark, and San Francisco produced proof issues with the S mint mark. These proof coins were made specifically for collectors and struck with special dies and polished blanks, resulting in a sharp, mirror-like finish, while the business strike coins from Philadelphia and Denver were the ones most Americans used in everyday transactions, although clad quarters were common and considered less glamorous than their silver predecessors, the 1978 quarter holds importance in its role as part of the last years, before the great transformation of U.S. coinage design, the 1980s, would begin discussions that eventually culminated in the state quarter program launched in 1999, which replaced Flanagan's reverse eagle with rotating designs honoring all 50 states. From a production standpoint, the 1978 quarters were minted in very large numbers to meet the demands of commerce. Millions upon millions of coins rolled off the presses and entered circulation, making them generally common today. However, condition rarity and proof quality add layers of interest to collectors. High-grade examples certified as Mint State 65 or higher can carry significant premiums as they represent the finest quality available from that year. While deep cameo proofs produced at San Francisco are highly sought after by those who appreciate their sharp frosted devices against the mirrored. Fields this year also saw the continuation of the Mint's refinement in striking quality and dye preparation improving the clarity of details in Washington's hair, the lettering, and the eagle's feathers compared to earlier clad issues of the 1960s. Historically, the 1978 quarter also represents a snapshot of the United States during the late 1970s. A period marked by economic challenges, inflation, the energy crisis, and shifts in public trust and politics. Coins like the quarter became daily reminders of stability, even as the country experienced uncertainty. Because coinage is one of the most consistent symbols of government and tradition, the Washington quarter in circulation during this period was a quiet yet powerful emblem of continuity. It carried the face of the nation's first president through grocery stores, gas stations, and pay phones, embodying the resilience of the American economy. Collectors often examine 1978 quarters for potential varieties or errors, such as double dies off center strikes or clipped planchets, which can transform a common-clad coin into a rare and valuable numismatic treasure. Though the standard issue may be common, the hunt for these unusual errors adds excitement to the world of coin collecting and keeps the year 1978 relevant for hobbyists to this day. In reflecting on the broader context, the Washington quarter itself has become a cultural symbol beyond just money. It bridges the artistry of coin design with the economic demands of modern America, and the 1978 issue sits in the middle of this legacy. It is a coin that shows how a design originally intended as a one-year commemorative for George Washington's bicentennial in 1932 grew into one of the longest-running coin series in United States history. Its endurance speaks to the success of Flanagan's design and to the way Washington's image resonates with American values of leadership, liberty, and trust. By the time the 1978 quarter entered circulation, it had already passed through the hands of two generations of Americans who were born after the coin was first struck in 1932. It was familiar, reliable, and embedded into daily life, and yet its importance cannot be overstated because every coin carries with it not only intrinsic value as currency, but also the historical narrative of the nation it serves. The 1978 Washington quarter remains today both an accessible collectible for beginner numismatists and a meaningful piece for advanced collectors who seek high-quality examples or unique minting errors. It embodies a time when coinage was stabilizing after the removal of silver and when the country was preparing for the next great evolution. In coin design, its presence in circulation might have been ordinary, but its place in history is extraordinary, and it continues to inspire curiosity, passion, and respect among those who study and cherish the coins of the United States. If you have ever held a Washington quarter in your hand, you have held a piece of American history that is not just a coin, but a reflection of the nation's heritage, culture, economy, and artistry. And among the many quarters that have circulated through the hands of millions, the 1985 Washington quarter holds a distinct place in numismatic study, and in the broader historical context of United States coinage, the Washington quarter series itself began in 1932, a year chosen to commemorate the 200th anniversary of the birth of the nation's first president, George Washington. The original design was prepared by sculptor John Flanagan, whose work was based on the celebrated bust of Washington created by French sculptor Jean-Antoine Houdon in the late 18th century. The obverse featured Washington's right-facing profile with the word liberty arched above the phrase, "In God we trust," inscribed to the left, and the date of issue at the bottom, while the reverse depicted the powerful American bald eagle, its wings outstretched, standing on a bundle of arrows with olive branches symbolizing peace, positioned below this design, remained in use for decades, and in 1965, it underwent one of the most significant changes in American coinage history as silver was removed from circulating coins due to rising costs, and the quarter was struck instead in a copper-nickel-clad composition bonded to a pure copper core. This transition ensured that the Washington quarter would continue to circulate widely while adapting to economic realities. By the time 1985 arrived, the Washington quarter was more than 50 years old as a series, yet it continued to serve as a central coin in American commerce and culture. The coins struck that year carried the same Flanagan design that had become iconic by then. Millions of Americans used the quarter for vending machines, toll booths, arcade games, and everyday purchases. It was a coin deeply woven into the fabric of daily life, but behind its common appearance lies a fascinating story about minting history, production variations, and the broader economic circumstances of the mid-1980s. The United States Mint struck the 1985 Washington quarter at three primary locations: the Philadelphia Mint, the Denver Mint, and the San Francisco Mint. Each with distinct characteristics, Philadelphia quarters carried no mint mark, a tradition that lasted until 1980, when the P mint mark was first introduced. However, the quarter from 1985 struck in Philadelphia still omitted the P mint mark, making it appear plain, while Denver issues carried the familiar D mint mark, and San Francisco produced proof versions for collectors, identifiable by the S mint mark. These proof coins were not intended for circulation, but instead for numismatic sets featuring sharper strikes, mirrored fields, and frosted devices that showcased the artistry of Flanagan's design in greater detail. The Philadelphia Mint in 1985 produced an astonishing mintage of more than 775 million quarters, while the Denver Mint added nearly 520 million coins to circulation together. These numbers reflect the massive demand for coinage in a booming American economy during the Reagan administration, a period of strong economic growth, rising consumer confidence, and increased reliance on cash transactions. This enormous production also means that the 1985 quarter is not rare in general circulation, but the true interest for collectors comes in the details. Errors and condition of surviving examples. Proof sets from San Francisco added just over 3 million coins, a much smaller number that has become especially popular among collectors because of their beauty and relative scarcity compared to the circulation. Strikes. The coin itself is struck in a composition of 91.67% copper and 8.33% nickel, with a diameter of 24.3 millimeters and a weight of 5.67 grams. The reeded edge of the quarter was a continuation of traditions that go back to early coinage, when reeding was used to prevent clipping or shaving of precious metals. By the mid-1980s, this feature remained largely decorative, but it also gave the coin its distinctive tactile feel when held. The surfaces of circulation strikes often show weakness in detail, particularly in the eagles, feathers, and Washington's hair, which makes coins with strong, crisp strikes highly desirable among collectors. Mint state examples graded by professional services such as PCGS or NGC can command premiums, especially in higher grades, where luster and sharp detail remain intact. One of the most fascinating aspects of the 1985 Washington quarter lies in its error varieties during mass production. At such high volumes, mistakes were inevitable. Collectors have identified numerous examples of off-center strikes, double strikes, broad strikes, and die cracks that give each coin a unique character. Among the most well-known are quarters with dramatic off-center errors, where part of the design is missing, while a blank crescent of the planche remains visible. There are also doubled die obverses, though these are relatively scarce and command significant collector interest. Each of these errors transforms an ordinary coin into a rare and valuable collectible, offering a glimpse into the complexities of minting technology at the time. Culturally, the 1985 Washington quarter is a coin tied to an era of significant change in the United States. It was the mid-1980s, a decade remembered for technological innovation, popular culture, the expansion of global markets and political shifts. Quarters from this period clinked in the pockets of Americans who were buying the latest cassette tapes, visiting arcades with Pac-Man and Donkey Kong, and driving cars that defined the decade. In many ways, the coin became part of the everyday soundtrack of the era, a piece of metal that connected ordinary people to their history without them even realizing it. Collectors today often view the 1985 Washington quarter as a common date, yet it is precisely this commonness that makes it so historically valuable, because it represents the widespread daily commerce of an entire generation. It tells us about minting practices in the 1980s, about the durability of Flanagan's design, which by then had endured over half a century, and about the way American coinage adapted to the needs of a modernizing economy. High-grade examples remain challenging to find because circulation was heavy, and many quarters from this period suffered. Where contact marks and dulling of luster-proof examples, especially those graded deep cameo, are particularly desirable and command premiums in the numismatic market. The legacy of the 1985 Washington quarter, therefore, is not found in rarity, but in its ubiquity. It was a coin for the people, used by everyone from children buying candy to workers paying tolls and commuters relying on public transit tokens purchased with quarters. Its story is a reminder that coins are not only objects of metal but storytellers of their time. They record economic realities, artistic choices, political decisions, and cultural habits, all compressed into a small round piece of metal struck millions of times over, yet still capable of carrying individual histories through their variations, errors, and survival in high grade. Today, the 1985 Washington quarter remains a popular coin for both casual and serious collectors, offering a window into American life during the 1980s and continuing the long tradition of Washington quarters that stretch from the Great Depression into the present day and beyond.